Be me, Walter. Pushing my mid-30s, working as a senior IT specialist for a decent-sized company. The kind of place that isn't a flashy startup, but also isn't a soulless corporate monolith. Just a regular place to earn a paycheck and go home. My little corner of the world is the IT department. There were 5 of us, all guys. Not by design, it just happened that way. We had our own ecosystem, a well-oiled machine built on caffeine, inside jokes, and a mutual understanding that we were the digital plumbers holding the whole building together. Our boss, David, was a manager from the old school. His philosophy was simple. If the network is up and the help desk tickets are closing, he doesn't need to know the details. He left us alone, and we delivered. It was a perfect arrangement. The atmosphere was relaxed. We'd talk about everything from new graphics cards to weekend DIY projects. If someone was stuck on a complex problem, 2 or 3 of us would huddle around their desk, throwing ideas around until we cracked it. No need for a formal meeting, no need to schedule a brainstorming session. Just pure, efficient collaboration. We ate lunch together most days, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. It was our time to decompress, to complain about the latest terrible software update corporate forced on us, or just talk about a movie we saw. It was comfortable. It was a brotherhood, of a sort. We worked hard, we respected each other, and there was zero drama. It was the kind of work environment people say they want. And then she arrived. I remember it was a Monday, probably late spring because the air conditioning was just starting to fight a losing battle with the sun. David called us into the small conference room. Standing next to him was a woman, maybe a few years younger than me. Her name was Nicole. David announced she was the new marketing manager, hired to bridge the gap between their creative vision and our technical execution. Corporate buzzwords that meant we were about to get a lot more work. My first impression of Nicole was severe. Everything was sharp angles. Her suit, her haircut, the way she held her tablet like a shield. She didn't smile, just gave a single curt nod to the room. We all did the awkward round of introductions. When it was my turn, I just said, "Walter, IT. If it has a plug, I'm probably the guy to call." It's my standard line. Usually gets a small chuckle. From Nicole, I got nothing. Just a blank, analytical stare. The first red flag appeared less than an hour later. One of my colleagues, a junior guy who was brilliant with databases, was trying to explain to her why her request for real-time petabyte-scale analytics for a simple banner ad was, to put it mildly, not feasible with our current infrastructure. He was being incredibly patient, using analogies about water pipes and reservoirs to make the concept of bandwidth and processing power easy to grasp. He was genuinely trying to be helpful. Halfway through his explanation, she held up a hand. The gesture was so sharp and sudden, he actually stopped talking mid-sentence. She told him that she had a degree and understood the basic principles of data flow, so she didn't need him to mansplain it to her. The word just hung in the air. The room went completely silent. You could feel the air pressure change. The kid just blinked, his face turning a little red. He mumbled an apology and retreated to his side of the table. The rest of the meeting was cold and formal. The easy collaborative energy we had just minutes before was gone, replaced by a tense, cautious formality. We all saw it. It wasn't about the technical explanation. It was a power play. She was drawing a line in the sand on her very first day. After the meeting, we shuffled back to our desks. No one said anything for a while. The silence was louder than our usual background chatter. That first incident set the tone for the weeks to come. Nicole was hyper-aware of workplace dynamics, but only through a very specific lens. Every interaction seemed to be scanned and analyzed for any hint of what she considered toxic masculinity. One time, one of the guys greeted a group of us, including her, with a casual, "Hey guys, morning." Later that day, we all received a department-wide email from her with a link to an article about gender-neutral language in the workplace. She didn't name him, but everyone knew who and what it was about. The guy who sent the email felt terrible, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just being friendly. After that, our language became stilted and careful whenever she was around. The easy banter disappeared. The jokes stopped. We started communicating with her more and more through email, even when she was sitting 20 feet away. It was just safer. An email leaves a paper trail, and your words can't be misconstrued in the same way. She seemed to prefer it that way, too. Her interactions were always transactional. She needed something. We provided it. No pleasantries, no small talk. The department became two separate worlds. There was the world of the five of us, where we could still be ourselves, and then there was the world when Nicole was present. We were walking on eggshells, constantly afraid that an off-the-cuff remark or a simple gesture of help would be misinterpreted and weaponized. This brings me to the incident, the one that changed everything. It was a few weeks after she started. Nicole was spearheading a huge new digital campaign. It was her baby, the project that was supposed to prove her value to the company. A big part of it involved a custom analytics dashboard that our team had built. It was a powerful tool, but it had its quirks. It was resource-intensive and pulled data from a server that was notoriously unstable under heavy load. We all knew the workarounds. There were certain scripts you had to run in a specific order. Certain times of day you avoided running big queries. It was tribal knowledge, the kind of stuff you learn from experience, not from a manual. I was walking back from the coffee machine when I saw her at her desk, looking increasingly frustrated. She was clicking furiously, her jaw tight. I glanced at her screen and immediately saw the problem. She was trying to pull a massive data set from the analytics server, but she was doing it in a way that was almost guaranteed to cause it to time out. She was essentially trying to fit a fire hose of data through a garden hose. I saw her let out a frustrated sigh and lean back in her chair, staring at the frozen progress bar. My first instinct, the instinct of any IT guy who has been doing this for over a decade, was to help. It wasn't about her. It was about the problem, a problem I knew how to solve. My brain calculated the variables. Her project was important for the company. Her being stuck was inefficient. I had a solution that would take me 2 minutes to explain and would save her hours of frustration. The logical, professional, and even decent thing to do was to offer assistance. So, I walked over. I kept a respectable distance from her desk, didn't want to seem like I was crowding her. I started off friendly and non-confrontational. I said something like, "Hey Nicole, looks like you're having a fight with the analytics server." She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. I continued, pointing vaguely at her screen. "That's a common issue. The server chokes if you try to pull that much data at once. There's a much faster way to do it by caching the query first. I can show you the command if you'd like." I was just trying to be helpful. That's it. It's my job to make the tech work for people. She stared at me for a few seconds, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, in a voice that was perfectly calm, but dripping with ice, she spoke. She said that she was perfectly capable of doing her own job. She told me that she had not requested my assistance, and that my unsolicited offer to show her how to do something was condescending. She finished by saying that my standing over her shoulder was disrupting her workflow, and she would appreciate it if I returned to my own desk. I was stunned. It was like I'd offered a drowning person a life raft, and they had accused me of trying to steal their water. I could feel my face get hot. All I could do was raise my hands in a don't shoot gesture and say, "All right, no problem." I turned around and walked back to my desk, feeling the eyes of my 4 colleagues on my back. They had heard the whole thing. I sat down, opened a ticket that had nothing to do with anything, and just stared at the screen, replaying the interaction in my head. I hadn't been condescending. I hadn't been aggressive. I had been helpful. And I had been treated like I was some kind of villain for it. I decided right then and there, fine, never again. I would not offer Nicole help ever again unless she submitted a formal, written request through the proper channels. If she wanted to spend the next 3 hours wrestling with that server, that was her choice. I put on my headphones and tried to get back to work, but I was fuming. The next morning, I had an email in my inbox. It was from HR. The subject line was "Formal Meeting Request." My stomach dropped. The email was polite and vague, asking me to come to a meeting with David and an HR representative that afternoon to discuss a workplace interaction. I knew immediately what it was about. I spent the whole morning with a knot of anxiety in my gut. I went over the conversation with Nicole 100 times. What did I do wrong? I came up with nothing. When the time for the meeting came, I walked into David's office. He was already there, looking uncomfortable. The HR rep, a woman I'd only ever seen at company-wide presentations, sat next to him, holding a notepad. They asked me to sit down. The HR rep started by saying that a formal complaint had been filed by Nicole. She said Nicole had reported an incident where I had approached her desk, uninvited, and engaged in behavior that she felt was an attempt to undermine her authority and competence. The HR rep used specific words: microaggression, unsolicited criticism, creating a hostile environment. I was speechless. I tried to explain my side of the story. I explained that the server was tricky, that I saw she was stuck, and that my only intention was to help a colleague and solve a technical problem. I said I was just trying to be efficient and collaborative. The HR rep listened patiently, nodding. When I was finished, she looked at me and said that while my intentions may have been good, the impact of my actions was what mattered. She said that in the modern workplace, it was crucial to respect boundaries, and that offering help where it wasn't requested could be perceived as questioning a colleague's skills. David, my boss, just sat there, avoiding my gaze. He didn't defend me. He didn't offer any context about how our department normally operates. He just nodded along with HR. The meeting ended with me receiving a formal verbal warning that would be noted in my employee file. They told me to ensure all my future interactions with Nicole were strictly professional. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just about the warning. It was the complete and total invalidation of my character. I had spent my entire career being the helpful, go-to guy, and now I was being officially reprimanded for it. The system, the very corporate structure that was supposed to be impartial, had taken her side without any real investigation. Her feelings trumped my intentions. Her perception became the official reality. I went back to my desk and sat there for a long time, not doing anything. My colleagues could tell from my face that it had gone badly. After work, we all went to a nearby bar. I told them everything: the complaint, the meeting, the corporate buzzwords, the verbal warning. As they listened, I saw their expressions change from sympathy to anger. They were angry for me, but they were also angry for themselves. They realized that what happened to me could have just as easily happened to any one of them. Any one of them could have tried to help. Any one of them could have been the subject of a complaint. It was a sobering realization. The comfortable, collaborative environment we had was an illusion. It was fragile, and it could be shattered by a single person who knew how to manipulate the system. We sat there for a while, just thinking. We knew we couldn't go on like this. Walking on eggshells wasn't a sustainable way to work. We had to protect ourselves. And that's when we came up with the new plan. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a plan for survival. The plan was simple, deceptively simple. It wasn't born out of malice, but out of a need for self-preservation. We called it the Professionalism Protocol. The core idea was this: Nicole wanted a purely professional, boundaries-obsessed, by-the-book work environment. So that's exactly what we were going to give her. We would follow the corporate rulebook to the letter. Malicious compliance in its purest form. No more casual conversations. No more friendly, unsolicited advice. No more 5-minute favors at our desks. Every single interaction with Nicole would be documented. If she needed something, no matter how small, she had to submit a formal IT ticket with a clear, detailed description of the problem. If she had a question, she had to send an email. No more stopping by our desks for a quick chat. We would be polite. We would be professional. We would be completely and utterly unhelpful in any way that wasn't explicitly required by our job descriptions. The tribal knowledge, the little tricks and shortcuts that kept the department running smoothly, that was now a members-only benefit. We sealed the pact over a second round of beers. There was no triumphant cheering. It felt more like a grim necessity, like boarding up the windows before a hurricane. The next day, the change was immediate. The air in the office was different, colder. Nicole came in, and as she walked past our desks, we all just gave her a polite, professional nod. No good mornings, no friendly greetings, just a nod. She didn't seem to notice at first, or if she did, she didn't show it. The first test came around mid-morning. She walked over to the desk of one of my colleagues, the database guy she had accused of mansplaining on her first day. She started asking him a question about some sales figures. He let her finish, then looked up from his screen with a perfectly neutral expression. He told her that it was a great question, and to ensure it was properly tracked and prioritized, she should submit it through the official help desk portal. She just stood there for a moment, blinking. It was a perfectly reasonable, corporate-approved request. There was nothing she could complain about. She looked a little annoyed, but she turned around without a word and went back to her desk. We heard her typing a few moments later. The ticket came through. He worked on it and sent her the answer via the ticketing system an hour later. A process that would have taken 30 seconds as a conversation was now a documented hour-long task. It was like that all day. Every time she tried to initiate a verbal conversation, she was gently but firmly redirected to the official channels. Could you just look at this for a second? Of course, just email me the link and a description of the issue, and I'll add it to my queue. I just have a quick question about the server status. The latest status report was emailed out this morning. For any further details, please submit a ticket. We were human auto-replies, polite, efficient, and completely impersonal. At first, she seemed almost pleased. This was the environment she wanted, right? No messy human interactions, just a clean, transactional flow of information. But the cracks started to show within a week. She didn't realize how much she had relied on the informal flow of information. She was no longer privy to the little conversations that saved hours of work. For instance, we'd often give each other a heads up like, "Hey, I'm about to run a massive update on the main server. It's going to be slow for the next hour." Now, she received no such warning. Her reports would run inexplicably slowly, and she'd submit a ticket complaining about performance. We would then reply truthfully that maintenance was being performed as scheduled and that the slowdown was expected. She was always one step behind because she was no longer part of the conversation. The project that had caused all the trouble in the first place, her big digital campaign, began to suffer the most. She would submit tickets with her requirements. We would fulfill them, exactly as written. We were no longer applying our experience or intuition to her requests. If we saw a potential problem or a flaw in her logic, we said nothing. That wasn't our job. Our job was to complete the ticket. She requested a data export in a specific format. We provided it. We knew that format was incompatible with the new marketing software she was using, but she didn't ask about compatibility. She asked for a format. She got it. A few days later, a frantic ticket would arrive saying the data was corrupted. We would then investigate and reply that the data was not corrupted. It was simply in the format she had requested, which was, as per the software's documentation, not a supported format. She was losing days of work to problems that a simple 5-minute conversation could have prevented. The isolation began to take a visible toll. She used to seem so confident, so in control. Now, there was a constant tension in her posture. She started staying later, her desk lamp the only one on in our section of the office. She'd sit there, surrounded by the silent, dark desks of the IT department, completely alone. The rest of us continued our routines. We'd still talk, still joke, still help each other out. But the moment she approached, the conversation would die. It wasn't even intentional. After a while, it became a reflex. The atmosphere would just change. We'd switch to professional mode. The breaking point came about a month into the new regime. It was the day of the big campaign launch. Her project, her moment to shine. It was a complete disaster. The website integration failed. The analytics dashboard she was supposed to present to the VPs was showing garbled data. The whole thing was dead on arrival. The reason was a cascade of small technical errors. An API key had been updated. A server path had been changed. A database schema had been tweaked. These were all things that had been communicated within our team through casual chats and emails. We all knew about them. We had all adjusted our own work accordingly. But Nicole was not on those email chains. She was not part of those conversations. She had built her entire project on a foundation of outdated information because she had cut herself off from the source. The fallout was immediate. David called an emergency meeting. Us, Nicole, and a couple of VPs who looked furious. Nicole was on the verge of tears. She was trying to explain what happened, but it was all just a jumble of technical terms she barely understood. Then, she turned and pointed a shaking finger at our team. She said we had sabotaged her. She claimed we had deliberately withheld critical information to make her fail. She said we had created a hostile, exclusionary environment where she couldn't do her job. The VPs looked at us, their expressions grim. David, our boss, finally spoke up. He looked cornered. He turned to me and asked, "Walter, what's your response to this?" I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. I looked directly at the VPs, then at David. I explained in a calm and measured voice that our team had followed all company protocols for communication and project management. I stated that all of our work was documented in the ticketing system. Then the HR rep from my meeting, who had been called in, asked the crucial questions. "Did you at any point refuse to complete a task requested by Nicole?" I replied, "No. We completed every ticket she submitted." "Did anyone on your team use unprofessional language or behave rudely towards her?" "No. In fact, following a prior HR complaint, we made it a strict policy to limit our interactions with Miss Nicole to formal, documented channels to avoid any possibility of miscommunication." I let that last part hang in the air. I saw the HR rep's eyes flicker with recognition. She remembered my verbal warning. The narrative flipped. This wasn't a story about a team of men bullying a female colleague. This was a story about a team that had been so terrified of a frivolous HR complaint that they had retreated into a shell of pure, unassailable professionalism. We hadn't been hostile. We had been obedient. We had followed their rules. We had respected her boundaries. We had done exactly what they told me to do. And this was the result. David, seeing his chance to deflect blame, chimed in. He confirmed that our department's ticket response times were excellent and that he had reviewed our communications and found them to be nothing but professional. He looked at Nicole and said, "Nicole, it seems the IT team did their job. You requested a purely formal working relationship, and that's what they gave you. I can't force them to be your friends." The silence in that room was crushing. Nicole just sat there, her face pale. She had been so sure that the system would protect her, that her narrative of being a victim would win the day. But we had used the system's own logic against her. We hadn't broken a single rule. She had built her own prison, and we had simply handed her the key. The meeting ended with the VPs saying they would reevaluate the project's leadership. Everyone knew what that meant. After that day, Nicole was a ghost. She was still there, physically, but her authority was gone. Her projects were handed off to someone else. She stopped trying to engage with anyone. She would come in, put her headphones on, and leave at 5 o'clock on the dot. There was no grand apology, no moment of realization where she admitted she was wrong. She just faded. The atmosphere in the office slowly started to return to normal, but it was never quite the same. We were a little more cautious, a little more aware of how quickly things could turn sour. But the brotherhood was intact. If anything, the whole ordeal had made it stronger. We had faced a threat, not with aggression, but with discipline and unity. Nicole eventually left the company a few months later. No farewell party, no goodbye email. One day her desk was just empty. I sometimes wonder if she ever understood what happened. She probably tells people she was driven out of a toxic, male-dominated tech department. And in a way, she'd be right. She found the environment toxic, but she was the one who brought the poison. All we did was let her drink it.